So, presentation, here we go. Ignore that, you didn't see that. Let us begin. So, welcome everyone to Nerdmotron's Doctor Who Series 14 slash Season 1 brief review of everything up to episode 6, because that's all that I've seen so far. Will I do a follow up at the end of the series? Probably. Also, this part may take an hour or more, so settle in, folks. Brief review and bonkers theory. It's going to annoy a lot of people. You will hate it, and I will bathe in your hate, and it will only make me more powerful. I cannot and will not, should not be stopped. So, the review. Let's do it. Episode 0, The Church on Ruby Road. That's right, I am including last year's Christmas special as an episode from this series, because it is, really. It's a good fun time. I liked it. I am very much a fan of the introduction of these supernatural elements into the series. Something a little bit different. I mean, series has always been a little bit magical, but in a sort of sci-fi kind of way. And now it's sort of this episode, we've got them kind of breaking us in gently by having the Doctor figuring out the science that the goblins use. You know, their rope science, which I love. I love that idea. It's just magic. It's just magic, isn't it? It's just rope magic. And it's even more magic-y magic than the usual Doctor Who magic. You know what I mean? I love it. Because there's that whole bit in the giggle where the Doctor's like, I don't know how to cope with this. Everything that I do is based on the fundamental laws governing the universe. And then along come these weird god beings that just shit all over it. And he doesn't know how to cope with it. And I find that fascinating. The time change element of it is very good and very poignantly handled. I do think it takes the Doctor a little bit longer than it should to kind of figure out what's going on. Basically, the goblins change time. If you've not seen any of this, then obviously there's going to be spoilers. Basically, the goblins change time so that Ruby never existed, and the Doctor sees the effects of that change sort of manifesting around him, and he's just a bit confused by it for a bit longer than needs be. I think by the time the audience has figured out what's going on, the Doctor should have figured out what's going on. And he was just spent like maybe even just like a minute longer, kind of being like, what's going on here? I could have come to that conclusion a little bit quicker, I think. I do like that they are running with this concept of time being far more malleable than we have seen in the series before. Obviously, time does get changed and rewritten, wibbly wobbly, etc. All of that happens all the time. I just like this. I like this notion that like space and time are just a little bit more fluid, a little bit more malleable now. So yeah, it really locks into the idea that history can get seriously messed up, and it is something that we will come back to a little bit later on. The song is very bad, and it's very, very silly, and it's intentionally bad. It's meant to be just a goofy, improvised, spur of the moment song. It was very, very jarring the first time around. Never been a thing in Doctor Who before, like music, full on musical numbers like that. You would get the odd one, like in the Daleks Take Manhattan or whatever the fuck it was called with Tallulah. Obviously, that is quite literally a musical number, but it's not quite the same thing as with this. So it's bad, but it's meant to be bad. It's meant to be cringy. I like that the solution to this problem was singing a song, something that we've not really seen before, and that's what we really needed for this series, was stuff that we hadn't seen before. And not to get too ahead of myself here, but one of my main conclusions with this series is that it's interesting for the new things it attempts to do, maybe doesn't quite stick the landing all the time. Obviously, Shutigatwa is fantastic. Millie Gibson is great as well. I think those two have got fantastic chemistry. They're great. They're fantastic. Angela Winter and Michelle Greenridge are also great as Cherry and Carla Sunday, Ruby's grandmother and mother, respectively. One of the most heartbreaking things about the episode is when time does get changed, just how miserable everything is. And Cherry goes from this, fair enough, she's bedridden, but she's, she's the life and soul of the party, quite frankly. She changes from that to just this miserable, depressed person just existing. Is very distressing. See, fortunately, it all works out in the end. I wish that we got to see more of them, but what we do get of them is very, very good. Everyone hates the new Sonic Screwdriver, and I don't really know why. It does sort of look like a shoe, like the sole of a shoe, crossed with a TV remote. I like it. Again, it's different from what we've seen before. I like the fact that it's not getting as much play as the Sonic Screwdriver has in the past. I felt like in the past the Sonic Screwdriver has just, particularly with like Matt Smith, got Smith screwdriver here actually. Ooh. You know, he's pointing it like a laser gun and flashing it around and all this stuff, and it just gets to be a bit much. But certainly with David Tennant and Matt Smith, it got used all the time, constantly. It was basically just a magic wand, and it was fine and fun. I like that it's a little bit more subdued. I like that it has different like extensions and attachments and things, like got a little USB dongle thing on it and a torch that kind of flicks out the side. It's good. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. And we get the first, the little asterisk, appearance of the actor Susan Twist, playing the heckler in the bar where Ruby's playing a gig. Now, I say first with an asterisk because technically her first appearance was in Wild Blue Yonder. I think it would be a bit of a stretch for me to include the 60th anniversary specials. Rest assured, I have a lot to say about those episodes, but we'll save that for another time, maybe for never. One thing I should just briefly mention before we move on, at the end of this episode, there is a very strange fourth wall breaking moment with the character of Mrs. Flood. It's just worth mentioning. It may come up again. Probably not. Probably not important. Probably isn't going to factor in a major way in some ridiculous ideas that I've had. Anyway, episode 1, Space Babies. Incredibly dumb, very adorable. It does have some nightmare CGI baby faces, though. Well, I mean, they did a pretty good job for the most part. And quite frankly, I like a bit of jank in my Doctor Who. I am not a huge fan of how sort of big budget and high production value it is these days. Remember when they struggled to make a convincing two-dimensional skin lady? But these days, it just tends to be too flashy these days, too cinematic, I guess. RTD does a Moffat. Now, this is going to be some controversial shit. It's not actually as bad as I'm making it out to be. Basically, what I mean is that Stephen Moffat's writing is like 90% recycled and reused ideas from his previous hits. H Bomber Guy actually has a couple of videos going into detail about the shortcomings of Stephen Moffat's writing. Generally speaking, I don't think he's a terrible writer. He has done some fantastic episodes of Doctor Who. In fact, he's done 2 of what I would consider the best episodes the show has ever had. First episodes that he ever wrote, the Empty Child and the Doctor Dances. Quite frankly, the show has never been better than those episodes. He just keeps coming back to the same ideas over and over again, and it just gets a bit tiresome after a while. So I am a little bit sensitive to where and when the show is repeating itself like that. So this episode plays a couple of beats from the episode The End of the World. So you've got the Doctor showing off in the TARDIS, got the phone call with Mum through time, and you've got the view out into space, companion being all awestruck and the Doctor being like, yay, this is cool, isn't it? Fortunately, it does blast past those bits fairly quickly and gets on with the new stuff. The look the Doctor gives after he fixes the time change at the start is chef's kiss. They go back in time to the time of the dinosaurs. Ruby steps out of the TARDIS and is like, oh, what if I accidentally step on a butterfly and end up changing history? And the Doctor's like, don't worry about it, it'll be fine. And I thought back to a very, very brief explanation that Matt Smith's Doctor gives when he tells people that he's a time traveler. And there's another scientist there who is like, but that's not possible because like the paradoxes that arise alone. And then the Doctor just kind of waves it off and is just like, yeah, paradoxes mostly just kind of resolve themselves. And then in this episode, Ruby steps on the butterfly and apparently just completely changes the entire history of the human species. Just instantly transforms into this bug lizard lady. And then he brings the butterfly back to life. How does he do that? Who cares? And then things get restored. And then they're stepping back into the TARDIS, and the Doctor's just like, what the fuck just happened there? What was that? He's just kind of starting to realize, I think, that reality has become a little bit more unhinged. What I didn't find quite so fun was the monster, the bogeyman. The explanation of where the creature comes from does not work for me for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's gross. It's made from actual bogies. I mean, very silly and funny, I guess, but just gross. And secondly, and more importantly, it would have been better if the creature was either one of the Toymaker's Legion, like Maestro, who we'll talk about shortly, or sort of related to those sort of creatures in some way. Now, I like the messaging of the episode in having the creature come from the same source as the babies, so they're not so different after all, and they learn to understand and accept one another. Great, good stuff, all for it. But I think you could still have that same messaging, but also have the creature created in a more magical way, like a manifestation of the baby's nightmares brought to life by some sort of cosmic dream god or something like that. Maybe have the creature made by the machine, but made horrific by some external force. I thought that this series was going to be a lot more focused on the weird god stuff, but it turns out maybe not so much. Maybe they're holding off on that for the next series to properly get into it. Probably not. I think they're going to mostly wrap it all up by the end of this series, which I'm a little bit disappointed by because I was expecting more of that sort of stuff. What we did get of it is great, but I kind of went into the series expecting that each villain that we were going to see, or at least most of them, was going to be related to the Toymaker in some way. And we get Susan Twist again. I think RTD's maybe getting a little bit lazy with his casting, eh? Now we come on to episode 2, The Devil's Cord. Probably my favourite episode of this series. Oh, who's that there? Don't worry about that. Ignore this person. They're probably not important. Other than maybe one other episode that we'll get to, this is a very strong contender. Almost certainly my favourite of this series. It's got weird god stuff. It's got all the weird god stuff you could possibly want. And I am so ready for all of that. I think it's really fun seeing just how rattled the Doctor is by it. Like, as soon as he hears that giggle, he's like, oh no, not this again. I don't know how to fight this fight. I mean, he finds ways to combat Maestro, but to see something so terrifying that it literally makes the Doctor run away and hide. We don't see that very often. We see the Doctor having to run away a lot, but we have very rarely, I think, seen the Doctor hide out of genuine terror. Jinx Monsoon is fucking incredible. Just going from this graceful elegance one moment to just this utter bug-eyed, maniacal lunacy the next, in a blink of the eye, without skipping a beat, pun intended. Just an absolute revelation. And the costumes! Holy guacamole! It's a musical villain! Tangent number one, everybody. I am not particularly a fan of musicals. I've been to a couple of stage shows. I've been to see Les Mis, Les Miserables. I've been to see Miss Saigon many years ago, and they were fine. I didn't hate them. Just not really my thing. I've been to see the Rocky Horror whatever show, and I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, but I had the worst time. To be fair, it wasn't the best environment for it because it was a school trip, and I was an angsty teenager at the time, so the thought of like being forced to get up and dance around in a busy theatre was just not doing it for me. Most movie musicals I don't really care for. Most animated musicals I'm fine with. For some reason, just live action movie musicals, just nah. But here's the thing. I love music themed villains. So for example, we've got here the Music Master from DC Comics universe. Not the greatest example, but he's still quite fun. You've got whoever this guy is from that one episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer that I actually like, and of course we've got Maestro. I mean, look at this attire. Look at the fucking piano keys inside the sleeves. What is going on here? It's the hair and the makeup and everything. It's so yeah. I mean, they're often an excuse for the actor portraying them to just bite entire chunks out of the scenery, bite chunks and chomp them down, and it is wonderful to see. And Jinx Monsoon does that dialed up to 11. It is just incredible to watch. The Maestro, not the Maestro, one of my favourite villains of all time. Anyway, The World Without Music, I like how it's kind of played for a laugh at first, like Cilla Black and other musicians really trying. They still really want to make music, they just can't. And then very quickly becomes really grim and depressing. Like really, everyone is just so miserable and unfulfilled, and no one really knows why. It's just very sad. So I think I get now why they put the light and breezy episode up top. I think technically speaking, The Devil's Cord would have been a better opening episode for the season. I understand why they went with the silly, fun, whimsical episode out of the gate, because you're going to put a lot of people off if you get too grim too quickly. The musical number is a lot of fun. It is very odd and very silly and wildly fun. We get an interesting bit of fourth wall breakage going on with the Doctor's little nods and winks to the camera. And I mean, the whole musical number in itself is kind of breaking the fourth wall. What's that all about? Because that's 2 episodes so far that have had quite significant fourth wall breaking moments. Now, we come on to tangent number 2. No, we don't. Fourth wall breakage. That's what I was just talking about. Now, we come on to tangent number 2. The Beatles. I fucking hate the Beatles, right? I'm going off on one here, folks. So just batten down the hatches, all right? This is gonna be a fucking storm. Why is the world so obsessed with these fucking people? Their early career is really no more impressive than any of their contemporaries. You've got the Byrds, Tambourine Man, Turn. Come on, people, what are we doing here? The Zombies, She's Not There, Time of the Season, great fucking songs. You got ELO, Electric Light Orchestra, kinda grating after a while, but a lot of good stuff in there. The Beach Boys, get them in the bin as well. They're shite. The Kinks. You really got me. Sunny Afternoon. Fucking Sunny Afternoon. All right? Sunny Afternoon exists. And people are going fucking nuts about fucking Love Me Do. Get the fuck out of here with that shit. And look, all of these bands, they all get praise, of course, even the Beach Boys for some reason. Don't get why everyone is pissing their pants over these four fucking Muppets. They didn't get good, right? They did not get good until they got sick of their irritating fans and decided they were done with all that screaming nonsense and decided to actually use their talents for a change. Because I'm not denying that they're talented musicians. They really are very talented musicians. They just make boring music with those talents up until the point when they actually started trying. Anyone could have got the break that the Beatles got. They just happened to be the ones lucky enough to get it, you know? There's nothing particularly special about them. They just happened to be the ones that got lucky and got the big break. Paperback Writer is a pretty good song, and Mr. Nowhere Man, and I am secretly a big fan of the Yellow Submarine cartoon. But apart from that, fuck them. I enjoy seeing them humiliate themselves. And then they save the day. Because of course they fucking do. Because how could anyone else possibly be good enough? You've got Cilla Black right there. I'm not a massive fan of Cilla Black. She's one hell of a musician, one hell of a singer, or she was. They're in fucking Abbey Road, for Christ's sake. There's going to be no end of incredibly talented musicians there. Are you telling me that no other musicians on the face of the planet could have figured out the combination of notes? Do the other musicians in Abbey Road not count? Choking on my own fury here. What was I ranting about? Could have had some cool collaborative thing where, like, maybe the Birds and maybe the Kinks and maybe Cilla Black, they all, like, contribute, they all come together, they form, like, a super group, maybe. That would have been quite cool to see. But no, you've just got Paul and John just sit down at a piano and tap a few keys and, oh, look, they saved the day. Fuck off! Oh! Anyway, episode 3. Boom. As if there hasn't been enough boom already, you know what I mean? So, what have I got to say about this one then? Oh, what's this sort of face in the background you can barely make out? That's interesting. I don't know what that's all about. Anyway, this episode gets a lot of praise, and I don't really understand why. It's fine. It's a decent enough episode. Good performances and pretty exceptional messaging to it. But it's just not that good. Moffat-y tosh. Stephen Moffat's tendency to just reuse his previous hits. Doing the Villain Guard thing again, are we? We've got the Anglican Marines again. It was kind of to the point where I was surprised that the Weeping Angels didn't show up in this episode. I would not have been at all surprised. One good thing, and very good thing about it, is it does seem like a direct response to the terrible episode Kerblam from whatever season of the Chibnall era that was in, where the Doctor encounters this, what is basically super galactic Amazon, and has nothing but praise for them. The ultimate message of that episode is that capitalism is good, actually, and it only fucks things up when people exploit the system. The system is fine. There are no systemic problems. It's individuals exploiting the system that's causing the problems. Where have we heard that particular crock of bullshit before? And basically, this episode, Boom, is completely the opposite of that. It's all about how the marriage of capitalism and warfare is horrifying and self-destructive and completely contrary to human life and dignity and fucking everything. It's just the worst possible combination of things imaginable. Yeah, as I say, it's taking shots at capitalism, industrialized military, and organized religion. Three of my very favoritist things in all the world. It feels very, very rushed, particularly at the start. I did not like how the Doctor just flings himself headlong into the middle of an alien battlefield without really stopping to think about it at all. Like, I sort of got the impression that he didn't expect there to be a battlefield there, that's kind of come as a surprise. So he doesn't know what he's heading out into. Like, fair enough, he hears somebody screaming, he thinks that somebody needs his help, but it just seemed a bit odd to me that he would just unthinkingly just run off. I don't like that he's so unobservant of his surroundings that he steps directly on a huge metal disc. Like, fair enough, it didn't have the flashing lights on it up until that moment, but, just eyes open, You're running across a battlefield. You've been in battlefields before. And this battlefield in particular looks pretty gruesome. Could be anything lying around out there. And he just doesn't seem to care. It just felt odd to me. The kid actor's dialogue is very strange as well, I thought. It was almost like the dialogue was written for a much younger character. Like, I think that character is meant to be sort of like 10 to 12 years old, but some of the ways they act and some of the dialogue that they have just seems like it was intended to be for a much younger character, like a sort of 4 or 5 year old. It sort of gave me the impression that they intended for it to be a younger character, to be a bit more impactful, and then maybe thought better of having a toddler in the middle of a war. But it was kind of like last minute, and they didn't really have time to brush up the dialogue. It just something a bit odd about it. Why did they bring a child into a literal active war zone? I get that the dad guy wanted to keep her close and all that, but does the church army not have some sort of daycare service? Although, to be fair, it does seem kind of on point for a church to be so lax with the safety of children. Moving on. Child in a war zone. Yes, there we go. Now we come to episode 4, 73 yards. Oh boy. I mostly really like it, but there is one element to it that really, really bugs me and really tarnishes the entire episode and comes very, very close to tarnishing an entire character. It's not quite as bad as that. It's very, very close to being that bad, though. The good stuff, though, spooky vibes. I have seen a lot of discourse about the plot of this episode and if it makes sense, particularly the ending. If you are struggling to make sense of it, don't worry, it does not make any sense. Trust me, I'm pretty good at figuring these things out. It doesn't make any sense. It's not about the plot, it's about the vibes. And it fucking nails the creepiness with the old woman and, just the sheer hopeless horror of being abandoned by everybody that you know and care about. The pub scene is very good. It maybe drags on for a little bit, and everyone is so mean to Ruby for no reason at all. She arrives in that place, she's clearly rattled by something, and they're just so mean to her from the outset. But it really ramps up the spooky vibes, and the performances are on point. I like the fact that it was played for a joke, but I think the fact that it drags on so long kind of undermines that a little bit. I honestly would have preferred if they had kind of joked about it, but it turned out that they were wrong and that there was some supernatural force at play. Speaking of which, question, who or what is Mad Jack? Because I'm a little unclear about that. It is sort of implied that, what's his face, Roger Ap William, we'll come on to him properly in a bit. It's sort of implied that he is Mad Jack, but I don't think so. Just because he just had that nickname as a kid. Why does that name also appear on one of the letters in the fairy circle? I don't know. Wibbly wobbly time stuff, I guess. Who knows? So yeah, I don't think Roger is Mad Jack. I don't think there is a Mad Jack. At least not in the sense that the episode sort of implies. It's kind of implying that Mad Jack is another one of these weird god creatures, kind of fucking with reality, and the old woman is maybe some sort of herald for his arrival or something like that. And you can understand that I was bang up for that. A creepy, spooky, supernatural monster. Fun. But it's never really made clear what Mad Jack is other than a weird nickname for a terrible person. Another thing, Ruby should really have known better than to mess with the stuff in a fairy circle. Like, you see something like that out in the wild, or nearly wild, just leave it alone. You don't need to go poking and prodding at that. Somebody's clearly spent some time and care and love crafting that thing, so just leave it alone. RTS? Yes. The showrunner for this series, Real Time Strategy. Russell T Davies, he does love a brazen political. I've said analogy there, but it's not even really an analogy. He's just like, straight up, just like Tory politicians are almost universally scumbags and should not be trusted and probably want to kill us all. It's not exactly subtly done, but that's just kind of the way that RTD does it with this sort of thing. I'm thinking of Aliens in London and World War III. And also bad stuff. And we've got Susan Twist. She's back again. That's not a bad thing. In fact, it's actually quite a good thing because this time we get Ruby actually recognizing her. We've got to talk about the bad stuff for this episode. First off, I would have liked to more of a hint towards weird god stuff. This episode was ample opportunity to throw a bit of that in there. They chose to go a different way with it, and that's fine. I just would have preferred to have seen a bit more of that. It feels rushed. A lot of the episodes in this series feel a bit rushed, like they wanted to be two-parters. And I think 73 Yards in particular, it felt like it wanted to expand out into a two-parter. Like we barrel on through the Roger Ap Williams stuff, and I know that it didn't really turn out to be the point of the episode, but I would have liked to have spent more time building up to how fucking awful he is. That brings me to the very big downer for this episode. The stuff about Roger Ap Williams being a fucking creep, and the way the topic is handled, and what it does with Ruby's character. I could go into more detail about it. It's heavy stuff. We already understood that this guy was awful with his whole speech about how he wants to launch a nuclear weapon. Like, once you've established that about a character, the audience gets it, okay? This guy is awful. I've written a big old rant about it, but I didn't want to make light of it by putting it in one of my comedy tangents. We'll leave it there. Let me know if you want me to come back to it. Episode 5! Dot and Bubble. What an episode. Almost perfect. So close to being perfect. Overall, I really, really love this episode. The message of it is very poignant and very powerfully delivered. Some of the plot elements don't quite make sense if you think about them too much. That's not exactly new for Doctor Who. The monsters are fun. I like the big lumbering slug things. I just don't understand why they exist, which we'll get to. Everyone seemed to miss the point of this episode, and I don't really get how. Well, I kind of get how. So everybody, like and not everybody, obviously not everybody thought this way, but so many of the reviews that I read and saw about it thought that the episode was going to primarily be about, sort of vapid rich kids being on their super lavish phone devices all the time, and ooh, isn't social media a terrible thing that's destroying society? It is about that to an extent, but that is very much not the point of the episode at all. In fact, I quite like it as a little bit of misdirection, because it very much sort of sets itself up as that being the point of the episode. But it was just a neat little bit of misdirection to distract you from the clues that were getting dropped throughout the episode as to what is going on. The point is it's so much deeper and so horrible in how true to life it is, so gut wrenching in the way in which it is delivered. Is there an echo in here? Because the episode's actually about echo chambers, and it is specifically about the stupidity and self destructive nature of white supremacist echo chambers. Ncuti Gatwa's performance is some of the best acting there has ever been. I mean, in general, Ncuti Gatwa is amazing. His reaction at the end as these fucking idiots are sailing off needlessly to their own deaths, like I said, gut wrenching is how I would describe it. I cannot say that I put in the Doctor's position that I would have the heart to even try and plead with those people. So good on him for sticking to what is the core of his character. And again, I think this is going to be very important when it comes to the finale, that he will try and save everyone. It was horrifying and beautiful, and quite honestly, something of a personal revelation for myself. I missed so many of the clues and the dog whistles, and I'm just like, okay, well, if I'm missing that in this episode of this show where it's not really being subtle about it, maybe I'm missing quite a lot of them in real life as well. So this is something very, very rare, I find, for Doctor Who, especially in recent years, where it has actually taught me something about myself and highlighted something that I need to improve about myself. And I guess that was part of the point of the episode as well. Any episode of any TV show that can teach me something about myself like that, I can't possibly say that it's bad. Even if some bits of it don't really make sense. Like, why the slugs? So I get that the computer running Fine Time somehow learns to hate these horrible people. Okay, fine. I like that it's going through them in alphabetical order. That's sort of very, to my mind, sort of machine-esque thinking. It would go for the most logical and efficient way of enacting its plan. What I don't understand is why it had to make the slug things or let them into the city in order to carry out its plan. It's a little bit vague. I mean, the Doctor does suggest that they are manufactured beings. I don't know if I prefer that explanation or the explanation that they were native creatures to that planet that the computer had just let in. It just didn't make a lot of sense, especially considering that we are shown that the dot devices, the things that are projecting the bubble around the characters, they can function basically like autonomous flying bullets. It cuts away, but you see it, basically shoot a guy in the head and kill him. If you sprung that on somebody out of the blue, most people are probably going to let out a little scream and then die. But I guess that isn't quite as visually interesting as big, dumb, flesh-eating slug monster, so whatever. Susan Twist! And this time, she is recognised by both Ruby and the Doctor. They park it for later consideration, and so will I. But there's something interesting going on with this Susan Twist person. Something very, very interesting. And this brings me on to episode 6. Rogue is pretty much a perfect episode of Doctor Who. Just classic Doctor Who stuff, with an extra big gay cherry slapped on top for good measure. I like the villain creatures, the sort of bird-shaped shapeshifters. I thought they were very fun. I thought their whole plan was very interesting. I like the character of Rogue. More of that guy, please. I don't have any real criticisms of that character at all, to be honest. I like the twist with Ruby's little side quest, and a nice little subversion of the whole trope of the companion meeting and befriending someone from that time period and having to try to explain all this alien stuff to them. Did not like the fake out death. Who the fuck are you kidding? I don't like the fact that the creatures refer to what they're doing as cosplay. I just don't think they would call it that. I don't think that concept would really mean anything. I think if you sat down and explained it to them, they would probably get it and might adopt the term. But it just didn't ring true when one of them, that like their leader, was like, we're going to cosplay them to death. I was like, okay, cool, are you really? And I didn't like that one of them goes to turn into the vicar at the end for the whole wedding thing, but it only copies the clothes and doesn't copy anything else, which is not how that ability was shown to work in the rest of the episode. Other than that, basically, perfect episode. Heartbreaking ending, again, gut wrenching. Give me more Rogue, please. More Rogue and the Doctor. I kind of hope they have this sort of thing where they're constantly chasing each other, trying to get back together, and then they almost do, but then something else kind of pulls them apart. I think you could probably tease that out for a good season or two, and then finally have them get together and him become a proper, full-on companion in very much the most intimate meaning of the term. Honestly, I would kind of like to see some of his adventures on his own, and I am really interested to hear how he's going to survive in whatever pocket universe he's been sent to with those murderous bird creatures. That would be something interesting to learn about. I would be very, very shocked if they never ever brought this character back. Also, a very strange cameo was that the Doctor's doing his whole speech about, I'm the Doctor and I've lived for thousands of years and I've had all of these different faces. And included among them is the fugitive Doctor, the Ruth Doctor, as some people call him, who I really, really liked for that one episode, or like 1.5 episodes that she was in. It was fantastic. Costume, TARDIS design, everything. Just mwah. So I'm glad that she's getting properly recognised as a regeneration of the Doctor. And so too, apparently, is Richard E. Grant, who has played the Doctor. Pretty sure he was in The Curse of Fatal Death, the Stephen Moffat Children in Need special from 30 years ago or whatever it is. I'm pretty sure he appears in that as a regeneration of the Doctor, but he is mostly known from an animated story that I cannot remember the name of. Probably should have noted that down. But yeah, I think that's very interesting because that is like essentially like expanded universe material, not really considered to be canon. We've never had this direct a link between the expanded universe materials and the main show like this. And I think that's very interesting. And I'm interested to see where they go with that. I would love to see an episode or two with Richard E. Grant version of the Doctor. Yeah, the death fake out was a bit lame, as I say. And we get our last Susan Twist encounter before the finale. That's the review. In conclusion, a very interesting series. Not necessarily very good, but it's definitely not bad. And it's definitely far better than anything we got in the Chibnall era. Although that's not difficult, to be fair. I just feel like a lot of it just isn't quite sticking the landing. I feel like a lot of the episodes are kind of a bit rushed, but what is there is very, very good. Just not great, but sometimes it is great. And I have very mixed feelings. There are definitely a couple of episodes in there that I feel like could have been expanded out into two-parters and probably would have served the story better. I really don't understand why they only got 8 episodes for this series. I know they've got bigger budgets per episode, but also it's Disney. More weird god stuff, please. Just give me more of that. I love the element of having the world be changed a bit by the effects that these creatures have just for a time after they've been defeated. So you've got the whole state of play thing after the toy maker gets defeated. There's the whole musical number in the Devil's Chord because it allows for these little moments of just pure fun silliness, like having the Doctor hit the TARDIS with a hammer and it clones itself, or a fourth wall breaking musical number springing up out of nowhere. That's good stuff, man. It's new and different, interesting, and I love it. So I hope you enjoyed that review. Right then, brace yourselves, folks. This is where you start to see the inner workings of my mind as never before. Brace yourselves. So, the theory. Now, of course, it is going to revolve around Susan Twist. It's not, as I implied jokingly before, a case of Russell T Davies getting lazy with his casting, or a budgetary issue or anything like this. It's important. There she is. Now, everyone that I have heard theorising about what's coming, hot debate all across the World Wide Web about what the connection is between the various characters Susan Twist is playing. I think this misses the bigger picture with what the Susan Twist inclusion actually means. There is a connection between these characters, but not in the way that you might think. I don't think that there is any in-universe link between these characters. I don't think we have another Impossible Girl situation. For those who don't know, that was the conclusion to one of Matt Smith's series. I don't think that's what we've got on our hands here with Susan Twist. There does not appear to be any connection between the characters in the show other than the actor playing them. There have been no hints that any of those characters know about any of the others, or that they are up to anything beyond what we see of them in the show. So the hiker that we see in 73 Yards, for example, is just a hiker. The dinner lady that we see in The Devil's Chord, just a dinner lady, tea lady. I don't think there is any in-universe connection between those characters. The Susan Twist repeat appearance is clearly this season's Bad Wolf, or Torchwood, or Mr. Saxon, the bees disappearing. So this is something that Russell T Davies has done before and clearly likes to do, and frankly, I love it. The Bad Wolf thing was fine. The Torchwood thing I thought was done a lot better. Mr. Saxon was what it was. And Series 4 is the best series of the show there has ever been so far. So yeah, this is something that RTD does quite a lot, sprinkling these often quite on the nose, but also quite tantalizing connections in the backgrounds of episodes, and then having it come to the fore for the finale when it all comes together. Now, for Series 14/Season 1, we have another string of this connective tissue, as it were, but this time it is done quite differently. The link this time isn't some hint to an in-universe character or organization or entity. The link is the actor Susan Twist herself. In other words, the link lies fully on our side of the fourth wall. Keep that in mind, because that's going to become very, very important. The link is not what you think. Now, there is Susan, as in Susan Twist, but there is also a character that has been in the show many, many years ago by the name of Susan. There's probably been a few characters by the name of Susan, but there's one major one. I'm talking about, of course, Susan Foreman, the Doctor's granddaughter, introduced and also written out way back in the early days of the show. In case you haven't seen it, Susan's exit from the show has her being left on Earth by the Doctor so she can go off and have a safe and happy life with whoever it is. But she is clearly not happy about this situation. He's clearly very upset about it, in fact, even to the point of throwing away a TARDIS key. TARDIS keys are pretty important things. I mean, apart from anything else, so they give somebody access to the TARDIS, but they're also like little pieces of the TARDIS themselves. They contain a little hint of the technology of the TARDIS. And she just leaves one on the ground for anyone to stumble upon. But yeah, I'm just kind of surprised that the whole thing with her throwing away the TARDIS key hasn't come up before. Susan Foreman even gets a mention in this series. The Doctor points out to Ruby where his younger self is at that time with his granddaughter, because in the Devil's Cord, they're back in the 60s when the first Doctor was cutting about with Susan and whoever else was there. A very direct reference to Susan Foreman. It isn't just like a passing nod and wink, it's like a full-on explanation. So I don't think that it is a coincidence that we have, one, a very direct mentioning of Susan. You know, we as an audience are meant to be paying attention to that. And two, we have the actor Susan Twist appearing in every episode of the show. I think you probably see where I'm going with this, but you're maybe not quite correct. So yeah, we've got a very direct reference to Susan Foreman. We have an actor called Susan Twist. What else can this mean other than there is going to be some twist at the end? Because as the episode The Devil's Cord tells us, there is always a twist at the end, and it is going to involve Susan Foreman in some capacity. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, okay, so Susan Twist is going to be Susan Foreman, something, wibbly time dimension variants or something along those lines. And honestly, that is probably going to be closer to the truth than whatever nonsense I'm talking. But I really do think there is still more to this than meets the eye. Now, I've mentioned this a few times. The fourth wall. I'm sure we all know what the fourth wall is. It's fun to break stuff, in a sense. Why do we break the fourth wall? Because it's fun, and it's usually played for a joke, like with Deadpool. Sometimes it is used seemingly for a joke, but then becomes quite important for the conclusion of the story, like with She-Hulk. She-Hulk is a fantastic series, by the way. Watch it. The Doctor has, in fact, broken the fourth wall a lot in his time. Way back in the Hartnell days, in fact, the first Doctor days, he says Merry Christmas directly to the viewers. I think the fourth Doctor also did it a bunch as well. In recent times, Peter Capaldi's Doctor did it all the time. There was a series where I think not every episode, but most episodes began and ended with him addressing to the audience basically the theme of that episode. Speaking of which, tangent number 3, how good did we have it with Peter Capaldi? I never really properly appreciated it at the time, but I've rewatched all of his run quite recently, and there is a bit of Drek in there, a bit of Moffat Tosh, and a lot of throwaway episodes, especially at the beginning of his run. But it gets so fucking good, especially like his last series with Bill Potts, who was an amazing companion as well. I've always said that the Christopher Eccleston series is my all-time favourite series of Doctor Who. Honestly, I don't think that's true anymore. I think Series 4, the Dr. Donna series, is better in basically every conceivable way. These days I go back and forth between the Christopher Eccleston series, the Dr. Donna series, and I loved his fourth wall breaking chats with the audience as well, usually, as I say, teaching them about some theory of temporal mechanics or, you know, time paradoxes or what perfect hiding might look like and stuff like that. Just so good. We just didn't know how good we had it. I certainly didn't at the time. So there have been a few odd moments of fourth wall breakage in this series so far. We've got Mrs. Flood, who does it at the end of The Church on Ruby Road. You've got Maestro playing the show's theme music in that episode, which was so good. I can love that episode so much. The Doctor gives a little wink to the audience in that same episode, The Devil's Cord. The Doctor breaks the fourth wall in the same episode that he talks about Susan. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that's a very, very deliberate choice. So the other mystery is who or what is Ruby Sunday? Why can't she or seemingly anyone find her biological parents, her next of kin? Even Davina McCall. Why can she sort of summon snow sometimes? Yeah, like I say, the other big mystery of the show. Who is Ruby Sunday? I think clearly we're building up to some big reveal about her, and so am I, oddly enough. I'm kind of just teasing this out. Don't know why, just for a bit of fun. Most of you have probably figured out where I'm going with this already, but you've probably not figured out everything. So I think, in a nutshell, Ruby Sunday is Susan Foreman. Ah, you see, bringing it all together in ways that you probably hate. Have I lost my mind? First off, yes, obviously I have. That happened many years ago. But wait, there's more. Here's how I think things are going to shake out. I should just say, I don't know if this is exactly how it's going to pan out. The actual details might be different, but the broad strokes, I think, are still accurate. So Susan felt hurt and betrayed when the Doctor left her behind. You don't just leave a TARDIS key lying around. And she would know that. You don't want the Doctor's enemies getting their hands on a piece of the TARDIS. Perhaps she tries to settle down on Earth and start a family, get a job, all that fucking bullshit. But I reckon she probably won't have taken to it very well because she's a time lady. Time Lord? Lady Time Lord? Generally speaking, Time Lords / ladies, they don't really do the whole settling down thing very well. I don't think that she would leave the TARDIS key just lying there. I reckon she would have come to her senses almost immediately. I reckon after the Doctor fucks off, she has her little huff. Like, justified one, I have to say. And then it's like, oh wait, probably shouldn't leave that incredibly powerful alien technology just lying in a pile of garbage. So I reckon she pretty much immediately just went and retrieved it. Using that piece of the TARDIS, I think she tried to build herself a new TARDIS, but I don't think that she's going to quite manage it using mostly Earth technology from the 1960s. Fair enough, she's got a bit of the TARDIS, but it's just a little bit, you know. But, you know, in theory, she could find a way to, like, reverse engineer something from it to help out, and then combine that with 1960s technology to create a TARDIS-like machine, which she will use to try and escape. But because it's kind of been cobbled together, doesn't really work very well, goes wrong, and she ends up at the edge of the universe, like where the Doctor and Donna end up in Wild Blue Yonder. Maybe she arrives there at a point just after the Doctor and Donna have left, so they don't bump into each other. Maybe the TARDIS part of the machine that she's built is trying to reunite with the main machine, as it were. Probably doesn't realise exactly where she is at first, and is just excited to be out in space again, having adventures. So she goes off to explore, and in doing so, kind of crosses over that edge of the universe into whatever weird reality the toy maker and the weird gods, as I call them, come from. In that place, clever as she is, she has a revelation. And this is where I'm going to lose most, if not all of you. The universe of Doctor Who, in the canon of the show itself, is fictional. She is fictional. The Doctor is fictional. All their adventures were fictional. It only exists because the TV show exists. So now, with that revelation, I guess she'll maybe feel betrayed not only by the Doctor, but also by reality itself, and plans to go after both of them, but can't because she's trapped. Maybe the machine that she's built breaks down when it leaves our universe, or something like that. You can write around these sorts of things easily enough. All that she can do is wait for her chance, or to put it another way, she becomes the one who waits. Now, the one who waits was foreshadowed by the Toymaker, and the Toymaker, who is one of the most powerful beings in existence, seems quite scared of this one who waits. So the Doctor broke reality in some way when he invoked superstition at the edge of the universe. That is what lets the Toymaker in to our universe, or into the Hooniverse, as it were. Not only does it let the Toymaker free, it also lets Susan free, or kind of begins the process of allowing her to sort of free herself. Maybe she does some sort of Time Lord space magic to turn herself into a human baby. Basically, she turns herself into Ruby Sunday, whether it's be like with a chameleon arch kind of situation, or, as I say, some other sort of wibbly wobbly Time Lord space magic. Turns herself into a human baby so she can one day be rescued by the Doctor and become his companion so she can get close to him and nab his TARDIS so she can use it for whatever her plan ends up being. As I say, the Toymaker mentions this entity called the One Who Waits and seems genuinely afraid. But why would the Toymaker be afraid of Susan? I reckon probably a combination of her being clever enough to manipulate him and him being afraid of what she knows and the power that it could give her to essentially unmake reality or something like that. Pretty far out, right? But wait, there's more! There's even more! I reckon all of this is going to lead to a confrontation between Susan and the Doctor, where she reveals to him what she knows in an attempt to rattle him so much that he simply gives up. I think there's probably enough love there between them that she probably wouldn't want to just kill him outright. She might even try and convince him to join her side. But in any case, she reveals what she knows to the Doctor, but the Doctor's going to have a revelation as well that he knows about this fact of reality, and he probably has always known. Why has it not come up before? Well, it has. As I said, the Doctor has broken the fourth wall repeatedly. Clearly, he knows there's an audience watching him. Most of the time, he ignores it because it doesn't really matter that much. I mean, it's probably interesting and a little bit concerning to him, but ultimately, most of the time, he just ignores it because all he really cares about is saving people, as was demonstrated in Dot and Bubble. He will try to bend over backwards to save people, even when they despise his very existence, and has every reason in the world just to leave them to their grim fate. Even then, he still tries to go out of his way to save their lives. So I don't think that he's going to care if the people that he is saving in the universe are technically real or not. You know, if it walks like a person and talks like a person, it's a person. You know what I mean? He doesn't care that much because saving people is far more important to him. So, the finale. I can see a couple of ways that this might wrap up. I'm not entirely convinced by any of them. I think the truth is going to lie somewhere in a blend of these sorts of things. Either the Doctor tricks Susan into becoming Ruby again, thereby making her forget about the revelation about the nature of their world, and then they just go off and have more adventures. Or the Doctor convinces Susan to leave the universe, basically go back into exile because she's too dangerous, and as a last act of kindness, Susan uses whatever lingering space magic exists to make Ruby real. What it will not end with, the Doctor killing anyone or having to reboot the universe. We've seen that enough times at this point. Either she is one of the weird gods just hanging out on Earth doing something and we don't really know. We'll maybe explore it in a future series. It's possible that she could be a version of Susan from before she turned into Ruby, who's just sort of keeping an eye on things to make sure Ruby goes with the Doctor. Because interestingly enough, it is Mrs. Flood that says to Ruby that she should go into the TARDIS and go with the Doctor. Can't remember exactly what she says, but it's something along those lines. Yeah, you should go. You should go have adventures. The other possibility is that she is a version of the Master slash Missy who's hanging out on Earth for some reason that we'll explore in a future series. I really hope that isn't the case. I think that would be quite boring. I think that we should probably leave the Master slash Missy alone for a bit of time. As I say, when it comes to the Mrs. Flood stuff, I'm not convinced by any of those options. The first one, her being a weird god entity, just seems unlikely for how uninteresting that would be. I know I said I want more weird god stuff, but I don't think it would be that interesting if it turns out she is the one who waits or whatever. The second option there for being another version of Susan is fun and interesting, I would say. Maybe a bit much to jam into what will already be a confusing finale, quite frankly. There's a lot of revelations to be dropping on an audience. I very, very much want it to go that way. I'm just not entirely convinced that it will. Honestly, the third option seems the most likely. If they can't think of anything else, they will probably have that as a kind of backup, kind of fallback position. But yeah, there is definitely something going on with Mrs. Flood. And that's the end. I have reviewed the entire series up to episode 6. I have laid on you some frankly bewildering theories as to where this series is going. Probably a lot of inaccuracies in there, but as I say, broad strokes, I think it's going to be along those lines. Maybe Susan Twist is going to be Susan Foreman. It could go that way. The main part of it, this revelation that the universe of Doctor Who only exists because the TV show was written, kind of like Stranger Than Fiction, in which he discovers that his life is being written for him by Emma Thompson's character. I think that's where this series of Doctor Who is going. I think it's going to be a revelation kind of like that. Definitely going to be something with this whole fourth wall breaking stuff. And I think it's definitely going to be revealed that the Doctor knows that the universe is fictional and he just doesn't really care that much about it. So, there you go. That is the end of it.